The flames reached toward the twilight sky over the coastal village of Pearl Bay, devouring generations of memories as Kai Chen watched his community burn. But as the ancient fishing settlement turned to ash, something else ignited inside Chen, a darkness that would make his enemies wish they'd never heard of the Hidden Current clan. They thought destroying his village would break him. Instead, they awakened a nightmare centuries in the making. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning mist clung to the waters of Pearl Bay, a remote fishing village nestled between towering cliffs along the South China Sea. Kai Chen stood on his weathered dock, watching his daughter Ming test new nets in the calm waters. At 17, she moved with the same fluid grace her mother had shown before the fever took her 5 years ago. "Father," Ming called out, holding up a strange object tangled in the nets. "There's something wrong with these markings." Chen's jaw tightened as he examined the metal cylinder his daughter had found, modern diving equipment marked with the logo of Golden Tide Corporation. They were testing their equipment in local waters again, despite the village council's protests. Master Chen, Li Wei, the village's chief fisherman, approached with a stack of documents clutched in his hand. At 65, he carried the same quiet dignity that had guided Pearl Bay's fishing fleet for 3 decades. "Golden Tide is buying up coastal properties all around us. The Zhao family's cove sold yesterday." Old man Zhao swore he'd never sell. Chen replied, his voice carrying an edge that made the seabirds scatter. 2 million yuan changed his mind. Li Wei handed him the papers, property records, sale documents, and a map showing Golden Tide's strategic acquisition pattern. "They're surrounding us, Master Chen, like a net closing in." Inside Chen's modest home, built by his grandfather's hands from island timber and sea-smooth stone, his sister May prepared the morning meal for the village fishermen. The kitchen had been the heart of Pearl Bay for generations, its rafters darkened by decades of hearth smoke and salt air. The aroma of congee, fresh fish, and traditional herbs filled the air as fishermen filed in, their boots leaving traces of sand on the worn wooden floors. "Your uncle called," May said quietly as Chen entered. "Master Wu says the Provincial Maritime Commission is holding a special session next week. Something about rezoning traditional fishing waters for industrial development." Chen's uncle, Wu Chang, had been Pearl Bay's voice in regional politics for 20 years. As a retired naval officer, he still held considerable influence in the province, but lately even his connections weren't enough to stem the tide of progress threatening to swallow their way of life. The fishermen were unusually quiet this morning. News traveled fast in coastal villages, and everyone knew what happened to communities that Golden Tide set their sights on. First came the offers, generous ones that tested even the strongest resolve. Then the pressure, mysterious problems with fishing permits, boats finding their way into restricted waters, anonymous complaints to environmental agencies. Hong Zhu, the village's master boat builder, who'd worked alongside Chen for 30 years, cleared his throat. "Master Chen, you should know. There's talk in town. Golden Tide hired Marcus Zhang as their head of acquisitions." Chen set down his teacup hard enough to crack the porcelain. Marcus Zhang, the man who'd nearly destroyed their village 15 years ago when he worked for Pacific Resource Corporation. The same man who'd been behind the mysterious contamination that killed half their fish stock, though they'd never been able to prove it. "Father," Ming appeared in the doorway, still damp from the morning's net testing. "I saw diving boats on the eastern reef again, taking samples. They said they had permits." May's fingers flew across her tablet. "They can't do that, that's protected water." 2 miles past our boundary," Ming corrected, "on what used to be the Zhao family's cove." Chen walked to the window, gazing out at the waters his ancestors had fished for 15 generations. Beyond the immediate bay lay the deep blue expanse, of the South China Sea, dotted with limestone islands that had watched over centuries of his family's history. This wasn't just water, it was legacy, written in salt spray and sacrifice. "They're planning something big," Wu's voice crackled. Through the speakerphone May had set up on the kitchen table. "Word is they're looking to build some kind of luxury resort complex. Hotels, marinas, high-end housing. They're calling it Golden Bay Estates." "Over my dead body," Chen muttered. "That's what I'm worried about, little brother." Wu paused. "These people Golden Tide, they're not like the corporations we've dealt with before. They don't just buy land, they erase history, and they've got friends in places even I can't reach." May touched Chen's arm gently. "Maybe we should at least hear their offer. The children could—" "No." Chen's voice was quiet but firm. "My grandfather gave his life protecting these waters during the typhoon of '62. My father worked himself to death, keeping our traditions alive during the Great Decline. I buried them both on that cliff overlooking the eastern reef, and I swore on their graves that this village would stay true to its heritage." Ming stood, her face set with determination. "Then we fight. We always have." Chen nodded, but as he looked around the kitchen at the familiar faces of family and loyal fishermen, at the photographs chronicling generations of Pearl Bay's history, a chill ran down his spine. Something in his gut told him this fight would be different. This time, the price of preserving their legacy might be higher than any of them could imagine. Little did he know, within 72 hours, that Kitchen, the heart of Pearl Bay, would be nothing but ashes. And from those ashes would rise something their enemies never expected, a nightmare of their own making. The lunch bell rang across the village, its familiar tone echoing off the cliffs as more fishermen gathered in the kitchen. Chen noticed Dr. Song, the marine biologist, rushing in with concern etched on her face. "Master Chen," Dr. Song called out, still catching her breath, "those water samples you asked me to test from the eastern reef, something's not right. The chemical composition is off, way off from our baseline readings last month." Chen exchanged knowing looks with Hongzhu. It was starting already, the same playbook they'd seen before. May quickly pulled up historical water quality reports on her tablet, her fingers moving frantically across the screen. "There's more," Dr. Song continued, lowering her voice. "I spotted unmarked drones over the northern fishing grounds this morning. They scattered when I tried to get closer." Through the window, Chen watched a sleek black speedboat crawl along the distant shoreline, moving too slowly to be lost tourists. May noticed his tension and squeezed his shoulder. After 30 years of marriage and 5 years since her death, his late wife's sister could read him like one of her cherished scrolls. "Uncle," Chen spoke into the phone, "remember that scroll grandfather gave you before he died? The one about the hidden current? Already ahead of you, little brother. I pulled the records this morning. Those techniques might be our ace in the hole if they're still valid." Ming, who had been quietly helping May with breakfast, suddenly spoke up. "Father, there's something else you should know. At school yesterday, Lisa Zhang was telling everyone her father's company is already selling pre-construction units for Golden Bay Estates." She hesitated. "She said Pearl Bay's waters would make a perfect marina." The room fell silent. Marcus Zhang's daughter attending the local school wasn't a coincidence. They were being studied, assessed from every angle. Chen walked to the old, wooden chest in the corner, running his fingers over the ancient scrolls that had belonged to his great-grandfather. Hidden among the fishing records and tide charts were secrets that few outside the Hidden Current clan had ever seen. Techniques of water warfare passed down through generations, disguised as simple fishing methods. "May," he said finally, "call an emergency village meeting for tonight. All hands on deck. Hongzhu, I want security doubled on the eastern and northern waters. Dr. Song, keep testing those samples. Document everything." He turned to his daughter. "Ming, I think it's time you learned about some of the less pleasant parts of our heritage. As the kitchen bustled with renewed purpose, May pulled Chen aside. I know that look, she whispered. You're planning something. These people, Chen replied quietly, they think they know what they're doing. They think they've done this 100 times before. But they don't understand what these waters mean to us. They don't understand what a hidden current master is, capable of when backed into a corner. The afternoon sun painted the sea in shades of gold and purple, but darker clouds were gathering on the horizon, literal and metaphorical. A storm was coming to Pearl Bay, and only one side would survive it. The family meeting never happened that night. As dusk settled over the village, the first signs of trouble came from the eastern waters. A dozen fishing boats suddenly broke, free from their moorings, drifting toward the shipping lanes in a panic. Hongzhu and several fishermen raced to contain them, but the chaos was only beginning. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The mooring lines were cut. Hongzhu's voice crackled over the radio. Clean cuts, professional job. And there's something else. They scattered some kind of chemical. The fish are going crazy. Before Chen could respond, Mi burst through the door. Our networks are down, all of it. Phones, internet, security cameras, even the backup system. A flash of movement caught Chen's eye. Lights, multiple vessels approaching from different directions. Too many to be coincidence. In the gathering darkness, he could make out at least 4 black speedboats and what looked like a larger vessel. May! Chen's voice was calm, but carried an edge his sister hadn't heard in years. Get Ming and head to the sanctuary cavern, now! I'm not leaving you, she started to protest. Please! Their eyes met, and decades of trust won over her objection. She nodded quickly, heading upstairs to find Ming. Dr. Song was already moving, pulling hidden weapons from behind kitchen counters. I'll cover the back entrance. The younger fishermen are at the docks. They'll watch the perimeter. The first incendiary device crashed through the living room window at 8:47 p.m. The second and third followed seconds later, turning the ancestral home's antique furniture into an inferno. Chen and Dr. Song managed to get the fire extinguishers from the kitchen, but by then more windows were shattering. The ancestral home of the Hidden Current clan, with its century-old timber and family treasures, was becoming a death trap. Through the smoke and chaos, a familiar voice called out from outside, "Think of this as a negotiating tactic, Kai." Marcus Zhang's smooth tone carried over the roar of flames. Golden Tide isn't asking anymore. This is happening. The only question is how much you lose in the process. Dr. Song raised her weapon at a shadow moving past the broken window, but Chen stopped her. Not yet. Get to the underwater passage. Now. He pushed her toward the hidden entrance in the pantry, an escape route built generations ago that led to a submerged cave system. Get my sister and daughter out. I'll buy you time. The heat was becoming unbearable. Family photographs curled and blackened on the walls, 5 generations of hidden current masters disappearing into ash. Chen felt something break inside him as he watched his grandfather's scroll case catch fire, the flames reflecting in the glass like demon eyes. Outside, Marcus Zhang continued his monologue, unaware that most of the family was already evacuating. Be reasonable, Kai. You can't stop progress. Golden Bay Estates is happening. The only question is whether the Chen family ends up wealthy or broken. Chen made his way to his study, fighting through the smoke. The hidden compartment beneath the floorboards contained something Marcus Zhang didn't know about, something that would make him regret this night for the rest of his life. As he worked the ancient wooden mechanism that concealed the compartment, a section of the ceiling collapsed behind him. In the underwater passage, Dr. Song led Mei and Ming through the darkness, guided by the luminescent algae that generations of hidden current masters had cultivated along the tunnel walls. They could hear muffled explosions above, probably the gas tanks in the kitchen. Ming was silent, but her face showed a hardness that hadn't been there hours before. May clutched a waterproof bag containing irreplaceable family scrolls and documents. They emerged in a hidden cave to find Hongju and most of the younger fishermen waiting with boats ready. Dr. Song was treating burns on two of the workers who had tried to fight the fire. "Where's father?" Ming's voice cracked. As if in answer, another explosion rocked the main house. May started back toward the tunnel entrance, but Hongju grabbed her arm. "Look!" A figure emerged from the inferno. Kai Chen, clothes singed, carrying an ancient wooden box and a scroll case somehow rescued from the flames. Behind him, the grand old house that had stood for over a century was fully engulfed. Marcus Zhang's voice rose once more. "This is just the beginning, Kai. Next time." The crack of an ancient spear gun split the night. A cry of pain followed, then the sound of scrambling boats. They had expected to break the Chen family tonight. Instead, they just made the biggest mistake of their lives. "Dr. Song." Chen's voice was hoarse from smoke, but steady. "Call Uncle Wu. Tell him it's time to execute Protocol Tsunami, the nuclear option." May's eyes widened. "Brother, are you sure?" He looked at his family, his sister's quiet strength, his daughter's fierce determination, then turned to watch his home burn, the flames reflecting in eyes that had gone cold as deep ocean currents. "They think they know what war is," he said quietly. "They think this is business as usual, but they just burned down the wrong family's legacy, and I'm going to teach them what a real nightmare looks like." In the distance, sirens wailed, too late to save the house, just as Marcus Zhang had planned. But he didn't know what Chen had retrieved from that hidden compartment. He didn't know about Protocol Tsunami, and he didn't know that he just started a war he couldn't possibly win. The Coast Guard arrived to find the Chen family standing in silent formation, watching their legacy burn. But there was something else burning in their eyes, something that made even the seasoned officers uneasy. "Mr. Zhang sends his condolences." A smooth-voiced woman in an expensive suit emerged from one of the unmarked boats that had arrived with the emergency vessels. "Tragic accident. He'd like to meet tomorrow to discuss how he can help." "Sarah Lee." She extended her hand to Chen. "Head of Public Relations for Golden Tide Development." Chen didn't take her hand. Instead, he opened the ancient wooden box he'd rescued from the fire and pulled out a single photograph. It showed a younger Marcus Zhang shaking hands with a man whose face had been carefully crossed out. "Tell your boss," Chen's voice carried, across the crackling of dying flames, "that I know about the Singapore incident. I know about Project Deepwater, and I know who really owned those fishing rights before the accident." The practiced smile faltered on Sarah Lee's face for just a fraction of a second, but long enough. She retreated to her boat without another. "A word." "Father," Ming watched the women's hasty departure. "What's Project Deepwater?" "Insurance," Chen replied, securing the box in Hongju's boat. "And the reason Marcus Zhang is going to wish he'd never heard of the Hidden Current clan." As the firefighters fought the last of the flames, Chen gathered his family and most trusted allies. "Hongju, get everyone to the northern cove. May, activate the offshore accounts, all of them. Ming, you remember how to get to Uncle Wu's island sanctuary?" The girl nodded, her young face set with newfound purpose. "Good. Take Dr. Song with you. She'll need her old contacts from the Maritime Research Institute, the ones interested in irregular chemical patterns in protected waters." The ancient wooden box contained more than just a photograph. Hidden beneath a false bottom lay scrolls so old their edges crumbled at the touch. Master Wu's island sanctuary stood silhouetted against the dawn sky as Chen revealed their contents to his gathered family. "These aren't just fishing techniques," Wu explained, his weathered hands tracing the faded characters. "The Hidden Current. Clan wasn't just a family of fishermen. We were guardians, Ming leaned forward, her eyes widening as she recognized ancient combat forms disguised as fishing movements. The nets, the diving patterns, they're all battle techniques, Chen finished. Passed down through generations, hidden in plain sight. When the Emperor's forces tried to control these waters centuries ago, our ancestors developed ways to fight that looked like simple fishing methods. Dr. Song, who had been analyzing water samples from around the burning village, suddenly burst in. "The chemical signatures match," she announced, her face grave. "It's the same compound that was used in the Singapore incident, the one that killed hundreds of fish and drove local fishermen out." "They're moving fast," Hongju reported through their secure channel. "Golden Tide's boats are already surveying the waters around the burned village. They've got diving teams in the water." "Of course they do," Chen replied grimly. "They think we're broken, scattered." He turned to his brother-in-law. "Ooh, it's time! Show them!" The retired naval officer led them to a hidden chamber beneath the sanctuary. The walls were lined with modern surveillance equipment, communications systems, and something else. Weapons that blended ancient craft with modern technology. "The hidden current hasn't just preserved old techniques," Wu explained. "We've adapted them. Every generation adds its own knowledge, its own innovations. Those diving teams out there, they have no idea they're swimming in our domain." May, who had been coordinating with their network of allies, looked up from her screens. "The first phase of the protocol tsunami is ready. Our contacts in the Maritime Authority, environmental groups, local fishing communities, they're all in position. But brother," she hesitated, "once we start this—" "They burned our home, sister." Chen's voice was steel. "Now we show them why our ancestors were feared in these waters." Ming studied the ancient scrolls, her young mind connecting patterns. "The techniques, they're not just about fighting. They're about controlling the water itself, the currents, the tides." "The Hidden Current clan earned its name for a reason," Wu smiled grimly. "Your great-grandfather could create whirlpools that looked like natural phenomena. Your grandfather could direct schools of fish to disrupt shipping lanes. Your father—" he glanced at Chen. "Your father mastered them all." Dr. Song's tablet chimed with new alerts. More chemical dumps detected spreading through the reef systems. They're trying to devastate the marine ecosystem, make it look like the area needs industrial rehabilitation. "Just like Singapore," Chen nodded. "Just like every other community they've destroyed. But they don't understand what they're dealing with." "Ming, remember those diving forms I taught you? The 7 flowing dragons?" she asked, referring to the complex underwater movements she'd practiced since childhood. "They're not just for gathering pearls," Chen revealed, opening another scroll. "Watch!" Through their surveillance feeds, they observed Golden Tide's diving teams suddenly struggling against unexpected currents. Equipment malfunctioned. Air supplies inexplicably depleted faster than normal, and the waters became mysteriously murky. "That's just the beginning," Wu promised. "The hidden current's true power isn't in fighting. It's in making the sea itself reject those who would abuse it." Sarah Lee's voice crackled through their intercepted communications. "Mr. Zhang, we're having unexpected difficulties. The conditions, they're not natural." "I don't care what's natural," Zhang's frustrated reply came back. "Get those surveys." "Done. The development schedule is already set. Buyers are committed." Chen turned to his family. "They think they understand these waters because they have technology, money, and influence. They're about to learn that some forces can't be bought. Some powers can't be measured with modern instruments." Dr. Song, who had been quiet, suddenly spoke up. "The old stories about the hidden current, about boats disappearing in calm seas, about entire fleets being scattered by unexpected storms, they weren't just stories, were they?" "The sea holds many secrets," Wu replied, "and we are its chosen guardians." For centuries, we've protected these waters from those who would exploit them. Golden Tide isn't the first to try. They won't be the last. Ming, watching the diving teams retreat in confusion, saw something her father had been preparing her for all along. This is why you train me so hard in the old ways. Why do you insist I learn every current, every reef formation? You're the next generation. Chen touched the jade pendant that had survived the fire, the symbol of the hidden current clan's leadership, and it's time you understood the full weight of that responsibility. The ancient texts scattered across Wu's war room told a story deeper than any modern corporate investigation could uncover. Chen traced the faded characters with reverence, their hidden meanings now crucial to their survival. Our ancestors didn't. Just master the currents, Wu explained, unrolling a scroll so old it required special handling. They learned to communicate with the sea itself. Each generation of the hidden current clan is chosen by the waters, marked by their ability to sense what others cannot. Through their surveillance systems, they watched Golden Tide's frustration. Their advanced sonar equipment showed impossible readings. Underwater drones malfunctioned. Professional divers reported disorienting currents that appeared and disappeared without warning. "Sir, something's wrong." A dive team leader's panicked voice came through their intercepted communications. "The currents. They're not following any natural patterns. It's like the water itself is fighting us." Marcus Zhang's response crackled with static and fury. "I don't care if you have to drain the entire bay. Find me a way to start construction." Ming, who had been practicing the ancient forms in the sanctuary's protected cove, suddenly called out, "Father, look." The morning tide was behaving strangely, pulling in patterns that hadn't been seen in generations. Schools of fish moved in perfect synchronization, creating barriers against Golden Tide's survey vessels. Even the local marine life seemed to be responding to an unseen command. "The sea remembers," Wu said quietly. "It remembers its guardians, and it remembers those who would harm it." Dr. Song burst in with urgent news. "The chemical analysis is complete. What they dumped in our waters, it's not just toxic, it's experimental. Military-grade stuff that was banned after the Singapore incident. I've contacted my old colleagues at the Maritime Research Institute. They're ready to help, but..." "But what?" Chen asked, noting her hesitation. "The Institute's funding comes from shell companies. Guess who owns them? Golden Tide." May finished, her fingers flying across her keyboard. "The corruption goes deeper than we thought. They're not just trying to build resorts. They're testing weapons, chemical agents that could control entire coastlines." Chen's jaw tightened. "Just like Singapore. Just like what they tried 15 years ago. There's more." Hongzhu's voice came through their secure channel. "Some of our younger fishermen, they're talking about taking Golden Tide's offer. Company men came by this morning, offering 10 times their normal wages to anyone who'll help map the underwater caves. The caves, the ancient hiding places of the hidden current clan, where their most powerful secrets were kept." Chen felt a cold anger rise within him, different from the hot rage of watching his home burn. This was the anger of generations, of guardians, the collective fury of those who had protected these waters for centuries. "Let them go," he said finally, surprising everyone. "Brother?" May questioned. "Every person who abandons us now is one less leak to worry about when we unleash what's coming." He turned to his daughter. "Ming, it's time for the rite of currents." The room fell silent. The rite hadn't been performed in 3 generations, a ceremony that bound a hidden current master fully to the sea, granting them powers that modern science couldn't explain. "She's too young," May protested. "Strength isn't in our techniques or our secrets. It's in our connection to the sea itself. The hidden current clan doesn't control the water. We speak to it, listen to it, become one with it." Through their surveillance feeds, they could see Golden Tide, preparing for a major operation. Barges loaded with construction equipment were approaching. Teams of armed security personnel patrolled the waters. They were done playing nice. "Let them come," Wu said, watching the preparations. "They think they know these waters because they have maps and sonar. They're about to learn that some powers can't be measured by modern instruments." As Ming submerged herself in the sacred pool, the water began to glow more intensely. The ancient characters on the chamber walls seemed to pulse with their own light. Something was awakening, not just in the young girl undergoing the ritual, but in the very waters around their island sanctuary. The sea was choosing its new guardian, and Golden Tide was about to discover why the hidden current clan had been revered for generations. The rite of currents transformed Ming in ways that even Chen hadn't expected. As she emerged from the sacred pool, her eyes carried the same phosphorescent glow as the ancient waters. The jade pendant around her neck pulsed with an inner light that matched the rhythm of the tides. "The sea has accepted her," Wu breathed, watching his niece demonstrate abilities that hadn't been seen in generations. Under her influence, the waters around the sanctuary moved in impossible patterns, creating vortexes that appeared and disappeared at will. "Master Chen!" Dr. Song rushed in, her tablet displaying urgent data. "Golden Tide's barges. They're carrying more than construction equipment. I'm detecting radiation signatures, military-grade containment units." Chen's eyes narrowed. "They're not just building resorts, they're creating weapons testing sites." Through their surveillance system, they watched Marcus Zhang coordinate with a new group of arrivals, men in dark suits who moved with military precision. Sarah Lee's voice came through their intercepted communications. "The American buyers are getting nervous. If we don't secure this site, it'll be secured," Zhang snapped. "One way or another, deploy the sonic devices." The water around Golden Tide's vessels suddenly erupted with high-frequency pulses, technology designed to disorient marine life and disrupt underwater activities. But something unexpected happened. Ming, still glowing faintly from the ritual, placed her hands on the sanctuary's stone walls. The sonic attacks weren't just being blocked, they were being redirected, turned back against Golden Tide's own equipment. "Impossible," Dr. Song whispered, watching her instruments. "She's not just manipulating currents, she's somehow altering the water's molecular structure itself." "The hidden current's true power," Wu explained, "isn't just about moving water. It's about becoming one with it, understanding its memory, its will." May's urgent voice cut through their secure channel. "Brother, we have a problem. Golden Tide just filed emergency permits with the Maritime Authority. They're claiming our waters are contaminated, requiring immediate industrial intervention." "Of course they are," Chen replied grimly. "The same strategy they used in Singapore. Create a crisis, then present themselves as the solution." He turned to Dr. Song. "How long until your colleagues can verify the chemical analysis?" "Hours, maybe minutes. But Chen..." She hesitated. "Once we expose this, there's no going back. These aren't just corporate crimes, they're military secrets. Powerful people will want them kept buried." Ming, who had been quiet since emerging from the ritual, suddenly spoke. Her voice carried an echo of ancient power. "The sea has shown me something beneath the eastern reef. There's a cave system Golden Tide doesn't know about. Inside, the ancestral chamber," Wu breathed. "The place where the first hidden current masters recorded their greatest secrets. And their greatest weapons," Chen added. He looked at his daughter with new understanding. The ritual hadn't just awakened her powers, it had connected her to centuries of hidden knowledge. Through their feeds, they watched Golden Tide's sonic devices start to malfunction. Expensive equipment short-circuited inexplicably. The sea itself seemed to be rejecting their presence, creating impossible conditions that no modern technology could navigate. "Sir," one of the military contractors reported to Zhang, "we're losing." Control of the situation, the water conditions, they're defying all known physics. Zhang's response was cold. Then change the physics. Deploy the bioweapon. Chen's blood ran cold. Mei, initiate protocol tsunami. All phases. No holds barred. Ming stepped onto the sanctuary's outer platform, her presence causing the surrounding waters to swirl in ancient patterns. "Father," she said, her voice carrying the weight of generations, "I understand now. Why our ancestors hid their power, why they disguised themselves as simple fishermen. Because true strength," Chen finished, "lies not in dominating the sea, but in becoming its voice, its guardian." He turned to his assembled family and allies. Golden Tide thinks they can control these waters with technology and weapons. They're about to learn why the Hidden Current clan has protected this coast for centuries. The jade pendant around Ming's neck pulsed brighter as she raised her hands. In the waters below, ancient powers were awakening, powers that no modern weapon could match. The nightmare was about to show its true face. The bioweapons deployment was meant to be subtle, microscopic agents released into the current, designed to make the waters uninhabitable. But as Golden Tide's teams activated the release mechanisms, something extraordinary happened. The sea began to glow, not just the faint bioluminescence common to these waters, but an ancient light that pulsed from the depths. Ming, standing on the sanctuary's platform, had her eyes closed in deep concentration. The jade pendant at her throat blazed like a star. "Impossible," one of Zhang's scientists radioed in. "The agents, they're being neutralized. The water itself is changing their molecular structure." Through their surveillance feeds, they watched Golden Tide's crews scramble as their equipment began to fail systematically. But Chen knew this was just the beginning. "Ming," he called out to his daughter, "remember the third scroll of tides." She nodded, her eyes still closed. The defense of the deep waters, the sea around Golden Tide's vessels began to move in ways that defied modern physics. Whirlpools formed and disappeared without warning. Waves rose against the wind. The water itself seemed to be coming alive. "Sir!" Sarah Lee's panicked voice cut through their intercepted communications. "The radiation containment units, they're being pulled toward the reef." Zhang's response was fury incarnate. "Stop them! Use whatever force necessary. Those units cost millions." But the sea had other plans. Under Ming's guidance, the waters began to shepherd the dangerous cargo away from populated areas, toward the ancestral chamber, a natural vault that had protected dangerous secrets for centuries. Dr. Song burst in with urgent news. "My colleagues, at the Maritime Institute, they've confirmed everything. The chemical weapons, the military contracts, the Singapore cover-up. They're going public within the hour. And I've found something else," May added, her fingers flying across her keyboard. "Project Deepwater wasn't just about weapons testing. They're searching for something. Something our ancestors hid centuries ago." Wu's face darkened. "The Pearl of Tides." "A myth," Dr. Song scoffed, but her scientific certainty wavered as she watched Ming command the waters with increasingly impossible skill. "Not a myth," Chen corrected. "A source of power. The first hidden current masters found it, protected it, and when they realized how dangerous it could be in the wrong hands, they hid it where no one could find it. Except someone who could speak to the sea itself," Ming finished, her voice carrying that strange echo of ancient power. Through their feeds, they watched Golden Tide's operation descend into chaos. Their sonic weapons had been turned against them, their chemical agents neutralized, their equipment failing. But Marcus Zhang wasn't finished. "Deploy the depth charges," his cold voice commanded. "If we can't have these waters, no one will." "He's gone mad," Sarah Lee protested. "The environmental damage will make it impossible for anyone to live here for generations," Zhang finished. "Perfect for our purposes. The insurance payout alone will cover our losses." Chen felt a cold fury rise within him. This wasn't just about their home anymore. This was about protecting the sea itself from those who would destroy it out of spite. "Ming," he called out to his daughter, "it's time for the final form." She turned to him, her eyes glowing with ancestral power. "The wrath of the hidden current? But the scrolls say it hasn't been used since the Great Typhoon of 1892, Wu confirmed, when our ancestors called upon the sea itself to judge those who would harm it." The jade pendant blazed brighter as Ming assumed the ancient stance. The waters around the sanctuary began to churn with impossible force. Deep beneath the surface, something ancient was stirring. Not just the power of the Hidden Current clan, but the very spirit of the sea they had protected for generations. "The depth charges are armed," Golden Tide's military contractor reported, "awaiting your command." But before Zhang could give the order, a sound rolled across the waters. A deep, resonant tone that seemed to come from the sea itself. The charges began to float, lifted by currents that moved with impossible precision. "What are you doing?" Zhang demanded, as his weapons were turned against him. "Not us," Chen replied over their open channel. "The sea itself. You wanted to test. Weapons here? Let's see how they fare against powers your science can't explain." The nightmare was about to show its true face, and Marcus Zhang was about to learn why some waters are better left undisturbed. The final form of the hidden current transformed the bay into something from ancient legends. Ming's movements, guided by centuries of ancestral knowledge, commanded not just the water, but the very spirit of the sea. The depth charges, meant to devastate the marine ecosystem, now hung suspended in impossible columns of water. "You wanted to test weapons here," Chen's voice carried across the churning waters. "Then face the weapon our ancestors created to protect these seas." The Pearl of Tides, hidden for centuries in the ancestral chamber, began to pulse with an otherworldly light. Its power, responding to Ming's awakened abilities, sent ripples of energy through the surrounding waters. "Sir," Golden Tide's military contractor's voice shook with uncertainty, "we're detecting energy signatures unlike anything in our database. The water's molecular structure is changing." Zhang's response was drowned out by a sound that seemed to come from the depths themselves, a resonant tone that made modern instruments go haywire. The sea around Golden Tide's vessels began to move with terrifying purpose. The ancestral texts spoke of this, Wu explained, watching his niece channel powers not seen in generations. When the hidden current masters join fully with the sea, they don't just control it. They become its voice, its judgment. Dr. Song's scientific equipment was displaying impossible readings. The water temperature, pressure, chemical composition, they're all shifting at will. It's like the sea itself is responding to some higher consciousness. Through their surveillance feeds, they watched Golden Tide's operation collapse into chaos. The depth charges, their own weapons turned against them, were being systematically disarmed by currents that moved with surgical precision. "You think your weapons can harm these waters?" Ming's voice carried that ancient echo, speaking with the authority of generations of guardians. "These seas were ancient when your first ships dared to cross them. They remember who their true protectors are." Zhang, realizing his plan was unraveling, made one final desperate move. "Release everything," he commanded. "All weapons, all agents, burn these waters to the ground." But as Golden Tide's crews moved to comply, something extraordinary happened. The sea itself seemed to rise up, not in chaos, but with deliberate purpose. Walls of water, glowing with the same light as the Pearl of Tides, encircled their vessels. "Impossible," Sarah Lee whispered, watching through their cameras as ancient power manifested in ways their modern minds couldn't comprehend. "No," Chen corrected. "Not impossible, inevitable. You tried to force these waters to submit to your will. Now feel their response." Ming, her eyes blazing with the same light as her pendant, began the final sequence of the ancient form. The sea responded with terrible precision. Golden Tide's vessels found themselves lifted by impossible currents, their weapons and technology rendered useless by forces that predated modern science. The Hidden Current clan hasn't survived for centuries because of our techniques, Chen explained over their open channel, letting Zhang hear the full truth of his miscalculation. We've survived because the sea chose us as its guardians, and now it chooses to pass judgment. From the depths, something was rising. Not a weapon, not a wave, but a manifestation of the sea's own will. The Pearl of Tide's power, amplified by Ming's awakened abilities, was showing Golden Tide the true meaning of force. "Father!" Ming called out, her voice carrying both power and warning. "The sea wants more than just judgment. It wants restoration." Chen understood. This wasn't just about stopping Golden Tide. It was about healing the wounds they'd inflicted on these ancient waters. The chemical weapons, the sonic attacks, the environmental damage, all of it would be answered for. "Then let it restore," he commanded. "Let the sea remind them why our ancestors chose to protect it rather than control it." The waters around Golden Tide's fleet began to glow with increasing intensity. Their vessels, their weapons, their technology, all of it was about to face the judgment of forces far older and more powerful than anything their modern minds could comprehend. The nightmare was revealing its true form, and Marcus Zhang was about to learn why some powers are better left undisturbed. The Pearl of Tides erupted with blinding light, its power amplified by Ming's connection to the ancestral forces. The sea around Golden Tide's fleet began to move with terrifying intelligence, forming patterns that no modern science could explain. "Last chance, Zhang," Chen's voice carried across the waters. "Withdraw your forces, or face what your arrogance has awakened." Zhang's response came through their intercepted communications, his voice tight with desperation. "You think your parlor tricks can stop progress? I have billions invested here, government contracts, military backing. And we have something far older," Ming replied, her voice resonating with ancient power. "The sea itself stands with us." The waters erupted, not with chaos, but with precise, devastating purpose. Golden Tide's vessels found themselves trapped in swirling vortexes that seemed to defy physics. Their weapons, turned against them by impossible currents, were systematically dismantled. Dr. Song's instruments were recording everything. The water's molecular structure, it's being altered at will. The pearl's energy is somehow allowing Ming to reshape the very nature of the sea itself. Through their surveillance feeds, they watched Golden Tide's military contractors abandon their posts. Even hardened mercenaries knew when they faced forces beyond their comprehension. "Sir," Sarah Lee's panicked voice cut through the chaos. "The radiation containment units are breaching. Whatever's happening to the water, it's affecting the seals." "Then it's time for our contingency," Zhang snarled. "Activate Protocol Scorched Earth." A new type of weapon emerged from Golden Tide's lead vessel, something that made Dr. Song's face go pale. "That's experimental sonic technology. It's designed to shatter molecular bonds in water itself. They're trying to make these waters permanently uninhabitable." But as the device powered up, Ming raised her hands. The jade pendant blazed with intensity that matched the pearl's glow. Ancient characters appeared in the water itself, glowing symbols that hadn't been seen since the first hidden current masters walked these shores. "The final judgment," Wu breathed, recognizing the signs. "The sea's ultimate defense against those who would destroy it." The sonic weapon fired, but its effects never reached their intended target. The water between Golden Tide's fleet and the shore had transformed into something else entirely. Not ice, not vapor, but a state of matter that modern science had no name for. "Impossible," Zhang's scientist gasped over their channels. "The water, it's becoming something else, something our instruments can't even classify." Ming's voice carried the weight of centuries. "Our ancestors didn't just learn to move the waters. They learned to speak to them, to understand their true nature. And now the sea speaks back. From the depths, a sound rose that shook Golden Tide's vessels to their cores. Not a wave, not an explosion, but the voice of the sea itself, channeled through powers that had protected these waters since ancient times. The Pearl of Tides pulsed one final time, and the waters around Golden Tide's fleet began to glow with an inner light that made their floodlights look dim in comparison. Their vessels, their weapons, their technology, all of it was about to face judgment from forces that predated civilization itself. "The sea remembers," Chen announced, his voice carrying across the transformed waters. "It remembers who tried to poison it, who tried to control it, who tried to destroy it, and now it answers." The nightmare was reaching its crescendo, and Marcus Zhang was about to learn why some powers should remain untouched, some waters should remain undisturbed, and some ancient forces should remain respected rather than challenged. "Father," Ming called out, her voice carrying both power and warning. "I can feel it. The sea, it wants more than just defense. It wants retribution." Chen looked at his daughter, seeing not just his child, but the culmination of generations, of guardians. "Then let justice be done. Let the waters show them why our ancestors chose to protect rather than conquer." The transformed sea began to move with terrible purpose, and Golden Tide's fleet faced the judgment of forces far older and more powerful than their modern minds could comprehend. The sea's judgment manifested with devastating precision. Golden Tide's fleet found themselves encased in spiraling columns of water that glowed with ancestral power. Their weapons, their technology, their very vessels, all were at the mercy of forces beyond modern comprehension. "What's happening to them?" Dr. Song asked, watching as the water around Zhang's ships began to crystallize into forms her instruments couldn't classify. "The sea is reclaiming what's its," Wu explained, his voice filled with ancient knowledge. "Our ancestors called it the purification, when the waters themselves cleanse their domain of those who would corrupt them." Through their feeds, they watched as Golden Tide's experimental weapons began to disintegrate, broken down at the molecular level by waters that moved with intelligent purpose. The radiation containment units, the chemical agents, the sonic devices, all were being systematically neutralized. "Stop this!" Zhang's voice cracked with desperation. "Whatever you want, money, power, influence, name your price." Ming's response carried the echo of centuries. "You still don't understand. This isn't about price. This is about balance, about justice, older than your concepts of wealth." The Pearl of Tides pulsed with increasing intensity, its power synchronizing. With Ming's jade pendant, the sea around Golden Tide's fleet began to change color, taking on hues that shouldn't exist in nature. "The molecular readings," Dr. Song reported, staring at her instruments in disbelief. "The water isn't just moving their ships, it's changing the composition of everything it touches, their hulls, their equipment. It's all being transformed." "Into what?" May asked, watching through their surveillance systems. "Into something pure," Ming answered, her eyes glowing with the same light as the ancient waters. "The sea remembers its original state, before mankind's poisons. It's restoring itself." Golden Tide's military contractors were abandoning ship, diving into waters that seemed to recognize friend from foe. Those who had worked to protect the sea found themselves carried safely to shore. Those who had sought to corrupt it faced the full force of its judgment. "Sir," Sarah Lee's terrified voice came through their channels, "the water, it's not just destroying our equipment, it's revealing everything, all our hidden operations, all our secret tests. Somehow it's making our data storage devices project their contents into the air." She was right. The transformed waters around Golden Tide's vessels had become like living screens, displaying evidence of every crime, every corrupt deal, every environmental atrocity they had committed. "The sea bears witness," Chen announced, his voice carrying across the waters. It remembers everything that happens in its domain, and now it shares those memories with the world. Dr. Song's colleagues at the Maritime Institute were recording everything. Environmental agencies, news outlets, government investigators, all were receiving undeniable proof of Golden Tide's crimes, transmitted through means that defied explanation. Zhang made one final, desperate attempt. He emerged on his vessel's deck with a device that made even Wu's face pale. "If I can't have these waters," he shouted, "no one will. This device will create a chain reaction in the seabed itself. Everything within 50 miles will be rendered dead for centuries." But before he could activate it, the water around his ship began to glow with blinding intensity. The Pearl of Tides, responding to Ming's channeling of ancestral power, unleashed its full potential. "You threaten the sea with death." Ming's voice resonated with power that made the air itself vibrate. "Then feel its answer. Feel the judgment of waters that were ancient when your first ancestors dared to float upon them." The transformed sea rose up, not in a destructive wave, but in a form that defied description. Golden Tide's flagship, with Zhang aboard, found itself encased in water that moved like living crystal, preserving everything within it in a state between motion and stillness. "The eternal moment," Wu breathed, recognizing what was happening. "The sea's ultimate judgment, spoken of in our oldest scrolls. Time itself becomes like water, fluid yet frozen." They watched as Zhang and his ship became suspended in a crystalline formation of water that would stand as a permanent monument, a warning to all who would dare to corrupt these ancient seas. The crystalline formation that encased Zhang's flagship stood like a monument in the bay, its waters forever caught between states of matter. Within it, Golden Tide's leader and his most advanced weapons remained suspended, a permanent reminder of the sea's judgment. Sarah Lee and the remaining Golden Tide personnel found themselves facing a choice as the transformed waters surrounded their vessels. "The sea offers you mercy," Ming announced, her voice still carrying that ancient resonance. "Abandon your weapons, speak the truth of what was done here, and you may reach the shore." Dr. Song's instruments continued recording as the waters performed their systematic cleansing. "The chemical contaminants are being neutralized," she reported, watching her readings with amazement. "The sea isn't just removing them, it's converting them into their original harmless elements." The Pearl of Tides pulsed with diminishing intensity as its work neared completion. In its light, the full scope of Golden Tide's operations became clear. Hidden underwater structures, secret testing sites, buried evidence, all were being revealed and purified by waters that moved with conscious purpose. "Your modern weapons mean nothing here," Chen addressed the remaining Golden Tide forces. "These waters were ancient when the first ships dared to cross them. They've seen empires rise and fall, seen countless attempts to control them, and they remain unchanging, eternal." Through their surveillance systems, they watched as Golden Tide's personnel abandoned their posts. Sarah Lee, seeing the futility of resistance, began transmitting data, evidence of every crime, every cover-up, every secret deal that had led to this moment. "The Singapore incident," she revealed, her voice shaking. "It wasn't just about profit. We were testing weapons for governments, corporations, anyone who would pay. These waters, they were perfect for hiding our operations. No one would suspect a simple fishing village." Ming, standing atop the sanctuary platform, began the final movements of the ancient form. The jade pendant at her throat pulsed in harmony with the pearl's fading light. "The sea doesn't forget," she declared. "It carries the memory of every drop that has ever been part of it. And now it cleanses itself." The waters around Pearl Bay began to shift color, returning to the pristine blue they had been before Golden Tide's corruption. Fish began returning to the reefs, drawn by waters that now hummed with life-giving energy. The marine ecosystem, damaged by years of secret testing, started to heal itself at an impossible rate. The restoration, Wu explained, watching the transformation. Our ancestors spoke of this, when the sea uses its own power to heal the wounds inflicted upon it. Dr. Song's colleagues at the Maritime Institute were documenting everything. This defies all known science, one researcher reported. The sea water's molecular structure is rearranging itself, creating conditions perfect for marine life to thrive. It's like the sea itself is conscious, purposeful. Chen watched as his daughter guided the final stages of the cleansing. The Hidden Current clan's true power had never been about controlling the waters. It had been about serving as their voice, their guardians, their partners in maintaining the balance of nature itself. "Father," Ming called out, her eyes still, glowing with ancestral power. "There's something else. The sea, it's showing me things. Knowledge hidden in the depths, secrets our ancestors left for future generations." From the waters arose ancient artifacts, preserved in pockets of time that the sea had kept hidden. Scrolls protected in bubbles that defied decay. Weapons forged from materials modern science couldn't identify. Tokens of a time when humanity understood that nature was not something to be conquered, but to be respected. The Hidden Current clan wasn't just created to protect these waters, Wu realized, examining the revealed artifacts. We were chosen to preserve knowledge that mankind wasn't ready for, power that could heal or destroy, depending on the hearts of those who wielded it. The crystalline formation containing Zhang and his flagship began to pulse with a subtle light. Not a prison, they now understood, but a preservation, a reminder to future generations of the price of arrogance, of the folly of believing that modern technology could supersede ancient wisdom. 1 month after the sea's judgment, Pearl Bay had transformed. The crystalline monument containing Zhang's flagship gleamed in the morning sun, a permanent reminder of nature's power. But it wasn't the only change that marked these ancient waters. The village was rebuilding, not just structures, but its very identity. Where Chen's home had once stood, a new building was rising. The Temple of Tides, a place where the Hidden Current clan's knowledge would be preserved and shared with those worthy of its wisdom. The last of the indictments came down today, Mi reported, reviewing updates on her tablet. Golden Tide's entire board of directors, their military contractors, even the government officials who enabled them, all facing justice. Dr. Song emerged from her new research facility, established in partnership with scientists who had witnessed the sea's power. The water samples continue to amaze us. The molecular changes triggered by the Pearl of Tides. They've permanently altered these waters, but in ways that enhance rather than harm life. Ming, now fully embracing her role as the youngest Hidden Current master in centuries, stood at the edge of the sanctuary's platform. The jade pendant at her throat still carried a faint glow, a permanent connection to the powers she had awakened. "The sea speaks more clearly now," she said, watching schools of fish move in patterns that seemed almost deliberate. "It's not just about protecting these waters anymore, it's about teaching others to understand them." Chen joined his daughter, seeing not just his child, but the future of their ancient legacy. "And what does it teach?" "That power isn't about control," she replied, her voice carrying that slight resonance that had become permanent after the ritual. "It's about balance, about partnership with forces greater than ourselves." The Pearl of Tides, now displayed in the temple's central chamber, pulsed softly in agreement. Its power had transformed these waters into something beyond ordinary science, a place where the boundary between natural and supernatural had become permanently blurred. Sarah Lee, who had chosen truth over loyalty to Golden Tide, approached with a stack of documents. "The last of the evidence has been transferred to the authorities. Every secret operation, every hidden test, every corrupt deal, it's all been exposed. And the military contracts? Wu asked, knowing the danger wasn't fully past. Declassified, she confirmed. The Sea's judgment made sure of that. When it transformed their data storage, it didn't just reveal their crimes, it made them impossible to hide again. Through their new monitoring systems, they could see the lasting changes in their waters. The reefs, once damaged by Golden Tide's testing, now thrived with unprecedented vitality. Marine life thought lost to pollution had returned, drawn by waters that seemed to welcome them home. Your father would be proud, May told Ming, watching her niece guide a group of young students through the basic forms of water manipulation. You've become more than just a guardian. You've become a bridge between the old ways and the new. The nightmare that Golden Tide had created had transformed into something else, a renaissance of ancient wisdom merged with modern understanding. The hidden current clan had emerged from shadows, no longer hiding their true nature, but serving openly as guardians of powers greater than human ambition. The sea remembers, Chen said, watching the crystalline monument shimmer in the evening. Light, it remembers those who would harm it, those who would protect it, and those who learned to understand it. Ming raised her hand, and the waters responded with gentle luminescence. And now it has new guardians, not just our clan, but all those who witnessed its power and chose to stand with us. The transformed bay had become more than just a symbol of victory. It was a testament to forces that modern arrogance had forgotten, powers that demanded respect rather than control, wisdom rather than dominance. Dr. Song's research team had established a permanent facility studying the unique properties of waters touched by ancient power. But even their most advanced instruments couldn't fully explain what the hidden current clan had always known, that some forces transcend explanation, some powers demand reverence rather than analysis. The sun set over Pearl Bay, its waters, glowing with soft light that hadn't existed before the awakening. The nightmare that Golden Tide had created had backfired spectacularly. In trying to destroy these ancient waters, they had instead awakened their true guardians, unleashed their true power, and reminded the world that some forces remain beyond human control. What happens now? Ming asked, watching the waters swirl. In patterns that spoke of ancient knowledge, Chen looked at his daughter, at the rebuilt village, at the waters that now pulsed with visible power. Now we do what our ancestors did. We guard, we teach, we preserve, and we remind the world why. Some waters should remain sacred, some powers respected, and some legacies honored rather than exploited. The sea shimmered in agreement, its waters forever changed by the awakening of ancient power, forever marked by the judgment it had passed. The nightmare had transformed into a dawn, and in that light, the hidden current clan stood revealed, not just as protectors of waters, but as guardians of wisdom that mankind had almost forgotten. The true power had never been in weapons or technology, but in the ancient partnership between guardians and the waters they served. And in that truth, a new chapter began, one written in waters that glowed with ancestral power, in tides that moved with conscious purpose, and in the hearts of those who had learned to listen to the sea's eternal voice. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.